Hi, my name is Desi, and I am a survivor of physical and sexual child abuse trauma. I always say I was born into trauma, basically. My parents had a very toxic marriage and abusive marriage and all types of stuff. And so I saw a lot of things at a very young age. My brother is 3 years younger than me. So I kind of felt like I always needed to try and protect him the best I could. So when my parents got divorced when I was 6, my mom met my stepfather, John, and he came into the picture pretty shortly after they got divorced. I want to say I was around 7. I have, little bits and pieces of memory of that time. But I think, from what I remember is I didn't like him, but I also didn't not like him. I just didn't really trust him, I guess. So I don't really remember the first time the abuse started. I remember there were certain incidences, like I saw him lose his temper. I saw he had like a anger type issue, but I do know that he kind of slowly started getting me like, oh, call me dad. I'm here for you. And kind of that whole grooming process of me starting to trust him. One of the memories I have is we were watching a movie late at night and he asked me to sit on his lap. And it was, my mom must have went to sleep. My brothers were sleeping. I don't really remember the details except for I was sitting on his lap at one point. And again, he had kind of grew me into thinking he was that father figure in my life at that time. And so I don't remember if I was like hesitant or not. But I do know that was kind of one of the first times when he started actual touching and that type of stuff. I remember in the moment thinking, this is weird. I don't think this is a father-daughter relationship type of situation. That's the first memory that my therapist has been able to dig up. It could have started at 7. Again, I met him at around that time, but I know for sure, I like to say 8 because I know for sure it was happening at that time. The reason I didn't say anything to my mom and my brother is from the beginning, he told me, hey, this is our secret. You can't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody. And I just kept that secret at first. And I knew it was wrong, but I was also scared of him. So I was kind of like, I better not say anything. How it escalated was, from what I remember, is it just kind of kept getting worse. He would come in at night and get me out of my bed. And then I started sleeping with my brother because I told my mom I had nightmares, but really I was scared of him. And so then he would go in and get me out of my brother's bed, or he would check me out of school, take me somewhere random, like a abandoned house. He would take me to like a construction site, or he would park like at a golf course, like behind the trees or things like that. And then he would abuse me, and then he would take me back to school. And at that point is I remember the threats had kind of started to get like worse and worse. I remember when I finally realized it was wrong and I just cried and I told him, I was like, this isn't okay. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, why are you doing this to me? And then he was like, if you ever say anything, I'll kill you or your mom. I'll bury your mom and your dad alive. I'll kill your brother, all types of things. And so it kind of really quickly got pretty violent to the point where, he would hit me, he would knock me out. He would hold a knife to my throat. He would hold a pillow over my face until I would lose consciousness. I'm pretty sure he broke my ribs at one point. And he knew how to do it in a way where I wouldn't necessarily bruise, like in my stomach and stuff, like where I wouldn't bruise, but it would still scare me. I don't really remember when things escalated, but I do remember it was pretty quickly. Like at first it was every once in a while, and then it kind of went to like weekly. And then next thing I know, I remember it being like almost a daily thing, from molestation of just touching to full on rape and and the worst things that you can think of. I definitely think I started to change. My personality started to change. I do remember in school and things like that, I started to like not take care of myself. Like I remember I would wear clothes that were too big, or I would not do my hair or things like that, because I thought if I was disgusting on the outside, he'd leave me alone. But then because of that, I got bullied really bad in school. And so I didn't really have a safe place. I would be bullied at school, bullied at home. And so I kind of just remember being really depressed. At that time, mental health wasn't really a known thing. At least nobody talked about it. But looking back, I definitely think I had depression, anxiety, like crazy. I remember having full panic attacks. So I guess when I was around probably like 12, 13 is when I really started to struggle mentally. I started having my eating disorder when I was around 13, started cutting. I was bulimic, anorexic, all the things. I tried to kill myself about 4 times, and I should be dead based on the things that I did. I had really bad insomnia. I don't think I ever slept. I did really bad in school because I would sleep in school because I didn't feel safe, like at home, obviously, to sleep. And so I finally asked my mom to let me get a lock on my door in our new house. I remember one night he tried to come in my room, and I remember him trying to like pick the lock on my door. But I remember him whispering and just saying, open the effing door, like trying to jiggle. And I honestly don't think I took a breath that entire time. I don't know how long it was. I just remember I laid in my bed and prayed and just did not move for what felt like hours. And then he finally gave up and went to bed. And I remember that that's where I believe like my higher power took over. And I was like, I have to get help. If I don't get help now, I'm going to die. Either I'm going to successfully kill myself or he's going to kill me. Like, I knew it was just getting worse and worse. Every single time it was more and more violent and more intrusive, just horrible. And so that morning, I remember I woke up and I remember I just was like, I'm about to make a huge decision. And I remember thinking like, if he finds out, I'm screwed, like I'm dead. And so I went to school, told my teacher. She actually went and reported it to the school counselor. Well, because of my past with my eating disorder, my cutting, and my attempt at suicide, this counselor just basically, she told her straight up, she said, it's just Desi and she's being a drama queen. It's not true. And I remember thinking, that's it. Like, I hear this was my chance and she doesn't believe me and I'm dead. And I remember that teacher telling her, that's not our job. Our job is not to investigate. We're not the police. Our job is to report what she's telling us. And so they did. They called. I remember a lady showed up, a little lady detective, and she said, look, your teacher told me what you said. This is a huge accusation, but your school counselor doesn't think that you're telling the truth. I need you to tell me right now, because if this isn't the truth, then this can end up causing some huge problems if it's not the truth. And I remember looking at her and she looked at me in the eyes, and I just remember my eyes like filled up with tears. And I said, I promise that he's been doing this for a long time. And if you send me home, you'll never see me again. He will kill me. And I remember she grabbed my hand and started crying. And I remember she said, I believe you. And he got free to life for what happened to me, which is minimum of 3 years. And obviously the max is life. He ended up being in there for 10 years. And during that time, our life flipped upside down. Right after I told, and after the court process is when I remember the mental health hitting me really hard. And I just wanted to die and I didn't want to be here anymore. And I hated my mom, and I hated my dad, and I hated my family. And I was so angry at everybody. And I just like hated myself. I remember I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. And I just remember like I ruined everyone's life and this is all my fault, and just taking all the blame and shame for everything that had happened. And my parents actually ended up taking me to a residential treatment program here in Utah. And I lived in that residential treatment program for 2 years. I was there from 15 to 17. They brought my mom in multiple times and told her, Desi will never be able to drive a car. She'll never live a normal life. She'll be in psych hospitals for the rest of her life. She's basically a lost cause. Like, I should be in a state hospital for the rest of my life, is what they would tell my mom. So during that time, I was in treatment. I was there for 2 years. I finally got out when I was 17. I decided to move to New Mexico, move to Albuquerque, move to New Mexico at 17 years old, because I had been in treatment for so long. I didn't know how to finish school. I didn't know how to do all those things. So it was really confusing, and I didn't know how to pick my life back up. And so I decided to leave, and I did. And I went to New Mexico. That's where I met my husband. We lived there for a year. Then we moved back to Utah. When we moved back to Utah, when I was around 19, 20 years old, I believe, is when I first started realizing this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, I want to help people. So I became a, psych tech, and then a counselor, and all the things. I just functioned every day. I went to work, came home, and I just kind of went through the motions of life. I wasn't actually living. I was just surviving. And during this time, I was told I wouldn't be able to have children. Basically, I have obviously really bad scar tissue. My husband and I ended up having a total of 5 miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy. So I ended up having both of my children that I have now with one tube, which is a double miracle. And that's when the doctor said I couldn't have any more children. Yeah, I was basically surviving, like I said, until 2015. And this is where the story gets even a little bit more crazy. So in 2015, my stepfather was released from prison, and I was told that he had a parole hearing coming up. I went, tried to tell them, wrote a letter, did a statement, all the things, and they still let him out. My life, again, flipped upside down. My mental health just completely fell again. And I was so depressed, and I couldn't imagine walking the streets with him walking the same streets. Like, it was just so hard for me to comprehend. I was terrified. But if I saw him, when he knows where we lived. So I was coming home from my best friend's baby shower one day, and my daughter was in the car seat. At this point, she was around 1. And I looked to my left, and he's in the car next to me, and he's with someone else. He's in the passenger seat. And I remember he got behind me, and I was frozen. I called my therapist, and I was talking to her. She's like, breathe. I want you to breathe. Everything's okay. She's like, Desi, I want you to pull off the freeway, and I need you to get away from him as quick as possible. So from that day on, my phone would just ring, and I would answer it, and it would just be someone breathing. I knew it was him. And I was like, and I would try telling my mom and my dad, and everyone just said it was basically my PTSD. I thought I saw him at Costco. I thought I saw him at the store. I thought I saw him at work. I thought I saw him, like, I would think I saw him all the time. And then one day we saw someone sitting in front of my house. My husband ran out. I tried to call the police, and he sped off as fast, like skid out of my street. And my neighbors had seen him and said he had been sitting there for over an hour, just sitting in his car. Things like that happened. At this point, I tried calling his parole officer. I tried calling everybody. I called the board of pardons, everything. Never received a phone call back. I was basically just completely dismissed until 2019. I get a phone call from the FBI. And during this time, I had always kept track of him. Like, if he was rearrested, I would get a message from VINE, which is like victims information, something. So then this time I got a notification he was back in jail, but I didn't even think twice because it had happened before. So then the FBI called and said, I don't know if you know, but John was rearrested. And I was like, yes, I was notified by VINE, and he's like, well, so I need to tell you what's happening. Are you okay? Can you sit down? And I remember being so confused. And he just said, so basically John was involved in that underground underground child ring that was busted here in the state of Utah. Well, they ended up doing a search. They did all the things, and they searched his apartment, his cell phone, and his laptop. And this is when the cop said, I don't know how to tell you this, but when we searched everything for John, he had over 200 pictures of child with your face cut out and put on every single picture of child. So he had digitally and physically put my face on children who were being human trafficked, raped, all the things. And he had pictures of it. And he had pictures of me at the park with my children. He had pictures of me on the front porch of my house. He had pictures of me at the store, like I thought. He had pictures of me on crime scenes at work. And I was shocked, and it was horrifying. And I remember being so angry because I was like, here I am advocating. I had already started the court advocating. I was doing all my podcasts. I was starting to do all the things, advocating for survivors, and yet I'm being victimized all over again. And I remember being so confused about it and so angry and being like, why am I even trying? Like, I'm never going to be free of him. It was horrible. And took me a couple weeks, and I looked myself in the mirror and I said, we're done. I said, Desi, you let him take your past. You will not let him take any more of your future. And I remember saying, I'm going to fight back. Like, screw this. I'm done. And I ended up going to court. I testified against him in July 2020, and he got basically life in prison. He still has a chance of parole, but it's very unlikely. But he did get life in prison. So what I'm doing today, like I said, I already started the podcast. I always tell people, like, even in the darkest of darkness, you can find light. You can find light within yourself to pull yourself out of it. You can turn your mess into a message. you have a purpose in your trauma. Like those are the things that you can do. You don't have to let this destroy your life. You can have a life actually full of joy and happiness. You don't have to be a victim your entire life. After court in 2020 was when I finally was like, okay, this needs to be something more than a podcast. I have my nonprofit foundation, which it's also the same as the podcast, and it's Candle in a Dark Room. So basically, I went from starting with my story to interviewing other survivors of trauma who tell their story of recovery. This is Desi from Candle in a Dark Room, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope I was able to give any of you guys some hope that no matter what you're going through, that you can get through it. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm always here to offer support to you, to other survivors. But thank you guys so much for being here.